Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this essay as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car, your truck, or put in those earbuds and sit back and take it in on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how different racial groups, whether we're talking about Africans, even African Americans for that matter, people from Islamic societies or Arabic societies or other societies, how they view conforming to the law and punishments for breaking the law or committing crimes. There's a vast difference on how these things are perceived and what's perceived as oppression or what's perceived as unfairness or lack of fairness in the process. Or harsh judgments or harsh punishments, such as going to prison or whatever. So I just want to talk about that because different groups behave very differently and perceive the law very differently and conforming to the law very differently. If we want a harmonious society where people get on, we have to accept, well, these are the rules. Let's all abide by the rules, and then we've got a much better chance of getting on well, and there'll be a minimizing conflict and social discord and so on. Now that's fairly straightforward. I don't think there's any argument over that. That if we all follow as in the rules we've agreed to, if we all follow the rules then and have independent courts, things like that, then we're all going to have a much better chance of getting on. And again, without disruptions and social discord. Now, to give you an extent of, or to the extent to which some groups follow this belief or view and others don't. Now, the Western, Christian scientific Enlightenment diaspora tend to follow this more than other groups do. There are groups, say, in China that fear arbitrary power of government. So if you do nothing and say nothing, then you can't upset anybody. But the very active wealth-creating Western life is based on that we all accept the rules. And part of that is if you break the law, you're going to be caught, convicted, and maybe suffer a punishment. It could be a fine or imprisonment, something like that. Or up until, what was it, the 1950s, people were still swinging from the end of a rope in the West. Nonetheless, now to illustrate the extremes of this, there was a park that was, public park that was declared a dog walking park, but there are a lot of signs around that the local rangers, they call them in Australia. I don't know if they've got different names elsewhere, but the local rangers would be patrolling, and if they caught your dog having a poop in the park and you didn't pick it up, and and they had like special poop pickup bags around, and you didn't pick it up, then you could get a fine. It wasn't a big fine. It was $50 or something. Now, if you didn't pay it, then the fine doubled. If you didn't pay that, you could suffer even more serious consequences, such as being dragged into court and so on. So, and then you had to pay all the court costs and the like. Now, this wasn't a big deal. It was okay. And it mentioned you have consideration of others. Other people want to use the park and that sort of thing. Now, to me, it was pretty straightforward. They're okay. It's great that this park is now designated as or part of it as you can walk your dog, and that's good. And they'd fenced the area off so your dog, if you let your dog off the lead, it couldn't run away. And go onto the street and get run over by a car or something. So I got the signs were up there, and everybody, it's a 99.9% white neighborhood, and everyone's diligently picking up the dog poop and putting it in, using the bags provided and putting it in the bins provided and so on, all very, very congenial. Then I don't know, he was brown, I'm not sure what he was, but his dog was quite small, was having a poop, and he didn't bother with it, and someone pointed it out, and he quite aggressively told them to fuck off and mind their own business. And he then added, well, it's only a little dog, it's only having a little poo, why would you care, and so on. So I was a bit surprised that he in spite of the signs, which he could read, he knew if someone mentioned it, he still thought, well, why do I have to conform with those laws? So it's not simply an issue of just law breaking in itself and concern or fear of being, but his view is, well, why should I conform to that law? Why should I go along with it? And I thought that was interesting because it's not a big deal. It's a matter of just consideration of others, isn't it? Do you have to treat it as this is a law that's oppressing me? Why not think about it in terms of? But he didn't see that he was part of as I read it, at least, he was part of the community. He was somehow an outsider, and thus the laws, just simple courtesy type laws and requirements, shouldn't and mustn't affect him or in any way govern or influence his behaviour. I thought that was odd. But anyway, far be it from me to get involved. I wouldn't think of burning down a building, for example. I wouldn't think of robbing somebody or using a weapon to rob somebody or go into a shop and break the windows and steal something. The thought would then cross my mind. So it's hard for me to understand why others would want to do it. I can understand desperation, but should that sort of such a brazen act of law breaking be the response to desperation? What are you doing with the money that the government's giving you currently? Are you misspending it or wasting it on, I don't know, drugs or something? But so I don't quite follow it, simply because I wouldn't do it. Now, this idea of arbitrating and this idea of laws and whether it's the laws like a contractual obligation you have with another party, so you're traders or something like that, or people who are simply interacting in some way where each party relies on the other to behave to consummate the deal. It could be a business deal or it could be anything, an agreement for marriage maybe. But the idea was that in, say, trading cities like city-states in the medieval times, like Venice or somewhere like that, that were doing rather well, they realized that part of their ability to attract people doing business and to attract people who would maybe open up offices there, and they would employ people and pay taxes, all that sort of stuff, they needed to have a reputation for fairness and scrupulous honesty, things like that, because people will very quickly go away if they don't perceive that's what's going on. So if you're a trader from, I don't know, somewhere in the Denmark or somewhere, and you've come to Venice and you figure that the local guy screwed you, you could go to a local court, and these courts pretty much guaranteed independent, impartial views and judgment. So this idea of having an independent court and impartial judgment has been around for a long time. The Romans prided themselves on it, as, by the way, did the Greeks. The Greeks less so; they were more partisan. You get the impression, but the Romans prided themselves on this, and this is very much part of the wider, Christian Western ethos about fairness and how you sort of keep social relations harmonious. Did it work 100% effectively 100% of the time? Of course not, but you don't find that anywhere else in the world. You only find it, as I understand it, at least in the West. Now, there were various ebbs and flows of it in say, other societies like Japan, as a case in point. But there's very much a class society that the word of the samurai warrior carried more weight than someone else's, regardless of the evidence. Now, in dealing with other races, I've noticed their perception of the law and how it should be adhered to, observed, understood, abided by is very different. And the white Christian Western world scientific Enlightenment way of dealing with or perceiving laws is very different from how Islamic peasants might deal with it, or how even black people who have lived in the United States for hundreds of years, they still perceive the law differently. Now, I've worked with African Americans and have hired some, and their perception of things is very different from. And I find it's hard to believe that they've grown up in white society for generations, yet they have still a very much an African view of things. Now, sometimes it's because they hang out together and they sort of, but the idea of independent, impartial law, if you break the law, you'll get punished. This sort of stuff. This is fairly straightforward, isn't it? I would think so, but not to them. And there's actually a new dimension coming to this because they've been told now for so often that white law is not legitimate, that whites are not legitimate, that white society is not legitimate, they're slavers and Nazis and yada yada. So that the many black people now perceive there's even less requirement to abide by the law, and if they are captured and prosecuted, like the court for committing a criminal act and prosecuted, sent to prison, that's illegitimate because that's just white boys' law, white people's law. And there's no idea that burning the building down or killing someone or beating someone up and stealing their valuables, there's no idea that there's a right and wrong issue there. It's not seen that way. The white person is administering the law. It is therefore illegitimate. It doesn't matter how many people I've killed. It's not legitimate what the white people are doing to me. I am now the victim because, and so this is now I don't care whether the judge is black or Islamic or whatever, provided that the law is applied strictly as it's applies equally to everybody. It doesn't really bother me. I don't know why a lot of black or Islamic people would be in Australia, for example. But anyway, if it was administered and everyone was equally treated under the law, then that's how the law was intended. That's how the administration of law was intended, the administration of justice. If you go and burn the building down or start the forest fire, then you're going to be caught and arrested for it. That's not the view that other religions have or races have. For example, if Christ is mocked horribly, the Islamic people don't care. If they perceive Muhammad is even disrespected, let alone mocked or denigrated, then they turn out in vast numbers on the streets, and the cowardly, craven Western police force will run away. The police force is very big and tough when it comes to dealing with white people, however, but when it comes to dealing with the brown Islamic hordes, then they run away, and it's told to do that. And or Black Lives Matter, they take the knee. I mean, fuck. This is the independent, impartial, non-politicized police force doing this. So this is very different perception. Now, I've worked closely again with, it was foisted on me in a company that to hire black people and to somehow make it work so that the black person was this guy I'm thinking of, he was a productive, hardworking, achieving just as much as the white people were, member of the team. So, but his different perception of the world, his perceptions were so different that it's like he came from another planet, and he would sort of look at me, but why can't I do that? It makes me feel good. I feel good doing it. Why can't I do it? It makes me feel good. And you're just using white boy logic here. Why must I not do something even though it makes me feel good? Why not? Why? And it's like talking to a child. It was 3 or 4 year old child. You can't explain. It's difficult to explain concepts to them because even something as minimally abstract would be beyond their comprehension. And it was the same with this guy. He was constantly running out of money because he's living a lifestyle he couldn't afford. So he's pestering me for pay rises all the fucking time. And I said, well, stop spending as much money. But why should I stop? It makes me feel good. Why? Well, I don't like being in my small apartment. I like to go out for dinner. It makes me feel good. Okay, fine, but you can't afford it. Well, why can't I afford it? Why can't you just give me more money so I can do it? And something, if a white guy came to me and said that and said, look, I want more money because my spending habits are out of control, I can't, you're right. And I wouldn't have to explain it. But with this guy, we'd have the same conversation again and again. And he'd be, but why can't I do it? And it came back to that. And this was the same with criminality. Now, to what extent he was gauging criminal behaviour is harder to gauge, but he would, pretty much every weekend he would get into a fight with someone he has asserted had somehow disrespected him. Now, the bar was set very low for this disrespect. Someone could brush past him and he would run after them and demand that they apologized. If they told him to get lost, he'd have a fight with them. And he was a pretty, so I mean, he must have been 6'3", 230 pounds, and he wasn't unfit. He was in pretty decent shape, this guy. So he wouldn't have been an easy guy to beat, but in a fight, I mean, but he was picking fights pretty much every weekend, and he'd turn up for work with a fat lip or a lump on his cheek, or his eye would be puffed up, this sort of stuff. And I said, well, why are you doing this again? Oh, he disrespected me, but surely it's not worth having a punch up every fucking weekend over this. Oh, but he disrespected. Why should I put up with this? Why should he be allowed to put me down, and so on? And he was saying that he was having to run away all the time because the proprietor, say they're, I don't know, at a restaurant or something like that, or whatever. The owner of the business, I'm calling the police, and so he'd be constantly running away in a situation of having to run away from the scene, but he didn't perceive he'd done anything wrong. If the police had come and arrested him for the fracas, it was the police were doing the wrong thing. And I had these conversations with him about it. Well, if you've started a fight with someone, you've assaulted somebody, isn't that a crime? No, it's not, because he disrespected me. Therefore, I'm in the right. I have the moral high ground. But how did he? What was this disrespect? Oh, I don't know. He kind of looked at me funny. What? That's it? You think he looked at you funny, and that's enough for you to assault somebody? But if you get arrested for the assault, which is a crime, you get arrested for it, then the police are at fault, not you. Well, yeah, he disrespected me. So the attitude to law and justice and accountability before the law are very different. I wouldn't have to explain that to a white person. If you go around assaulting people, you're going to end up in court and possibly end up fined or good behaviour bond, or even worse, in detention. But he didn't see it that way. That wasn't his perception. Now the same goes with people who say are not necessarily even a devout Muslim, but their hair trigger in the same way this black guy's hair trigger with disrespect. That the religion is disrespected, the Prophet Muhammad is disrespected in some way. And again, the bar is set very low here. So the slightest perceived disrespect, they perceive they now have the right to commit crimes because you disrespected the Prophet. We can now commit crimes. And why should we be accountable for it? Why should we be, we're responding to the disrespect that allows us vast license to commit crimes because of and now I wouldn't see that. I don't see the one. I don't know a white person that does. So if Christ is disrespected, I'm not a practicing Christian, so I wouldn't make a fuss of this anyway. But if Christ is disrespected, there are proper channels to do this through local members of parliament and lobby groups or something, and so on. So those are the ways to deal with it. It's not to go out and riot. I wouldn't think. So when we've got this vastly different perception of how the law should be adhered to, how it should be applied, how the law should be perceived as an independent set of rules that we all have to adhere to, the different groups are perceiving this very differently. And more of these groups are being stuffed into the West. And because of wokeness and the social division that the globalists are aggressively pushing, this means the law is perceived very differently by different groups. And it's now moved to the next level where it's being applied differently to different groups. Surely this has got to be the bedrock of social dislocation. You've been attached to us today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.